Vadim Nemkov receives a hero's welcome after dethroning champ Ryan Bader. Is he the best light heavyweight in the world? Julia Budd gets the unanimous decision victory over Jesse Bealey. Does this set up a rematch with featherweight champion Chris Cyborg? Valentine Moldovsky talks Russian takeover after winning his 5th straight heavyweight fight. Where does he rank amongst the division? We'll also take a look at the upcoming Bellator 245 and 246 cards. We got a bantamweight title on the line, as well as a lot of great matchups to break down. All this plus more as Bellator MMA presents The Dose. What's happening, guys? Chael Sonnen here, filling in for Jay Glazer. Of course, I'm joined by the man, Robin Black. Robin, let's recap a little bit. Bellator 244, what's your first take?
Man, how about that Vadim Nemkov? I mean, listen, when you wrap your foot around the back of somebody's head while looking straight at him, that's something we got to talk about, something we got to look at.
What'd you think about the stoppage? I mean, Vadim even did an interview afterwards, and he said, well, you know, I did knock him down 3 times. I kind of thought they were going to stop the fight. I mean, the referee gave Bader every chance. I'm not looking back on it, but I think there is a relevance to the new champ saying, look, I had 3 knockdowns in 1 round. Give me some credit.
Yeah, and hey, listen, when the ref allows it to keep going, you get to knock him down again, which is exactly what he did. But let's be honest, like, Ryan wanted to be in that fight. Ryan wanted to stay in that fight, and Vadim kept knocking him down until he couldn't stand it any longer.
You know, I appreciate that point by you, because in this sport, we only look at the champion, and for good reason. We shine a guy's wheels and it's his 15 minutes. But if you don't pay credit to, say, an effort by Ryan Bader, you really can't give Nemkov all that he deserves. I mean, Bader was in that fight. Bader was trying to win. The fact that Bader got knocked down 3 times, well, that's one way to look at it. Or the fact that Bader got back up to his feet and was trying to retain that championship. And for me, that was a takeaway. I know I'm complimenting Bader, but you know what I mean? I'm trying to pass that to Nemkov, but you have to understand both sides of it.
For sure. People often will ask after, hey, man, what did this guy do wrong? Well, maybe he did something wrong, but you can do everything right and still lose a fight. You can make every correct computation and calculation and every correct move. And if the guy makes one more than you and he does it over and over, he'll win that fight.
Bader said before the fight, the only thing I cannot do is move backwards. I must move forward, and every time my offense shuts down, it's because I'm not going into forward motion. Look, I've seen a lot of Bader's fights. I've been in a division with him. I've studied the guy. I didn't notice that. I really didn't notice that, Robin, until Bader pointed it out for everybody. In hindsight of that fight, he is right, and when he did get in trouble, he wasn't moving forward.
Yeah, you know, it's tricky, right? Like, we think of that, and the audience watches it, and they're like, why isn't Bader doing the thing he wants to do? It goes back to when we're a baby. We touch that element, burns our thumb. We don't want to touch it again. How many times can you touch it? When Bader tried to move forward, he got burned on the element, and it forced him to move back. Again, yes, Bader didn't accomplish his goals, but it is due to what Vadim did to take that away from him. Vadim, he didn't just not move forward. Vadim pushed him back.
No, I agree. And there's always questions on a guy. I mean, even when a guy's a champion, you look at Nemkov, I mean, quick recap, fought 4 world champions, 2 different weight classes, beat all 4 world champions, is the world champion, first Russian, champion of 205. I get the story, and so do you. But when you do look at it, to act as though there's not still questions, is there a possible blueprint to beat him? And what I'm talking about here is the 5-round club. This was scheduled for 5 rounds. This is the first fight he's ever had scheduled for 5 rounds. You wonder if he can pace himself, if he can push, if he can go what we call the championship round. Robin, we still don't know. In all fairness, we still haven't gotten that deep yet.
For sure. And what some of the elements that he did to be able to win that fight. It's great when you kick a guy in the head and you keep swarming him and then you keep knocking him down until you win it. But he was sprinting. He was sprinting in that fight. You can't sprint for 25 minutes. So you either have to accept that this could go later, which changes the way you'd fight in rounds 1, 2, and 3, or you save nothing for the swim back, but you get there and you're in trouble. You're absolutely right, man. We haven't seen that. And if you were fighting him, you got to be smart in those first 10 minutes and then make it go later. That's a good point.
Sure, I offer that speculation because Mike Tyson very famously but very accurately said, if you look for the finish, you aren't going to win the decision.
But hey, if you look for the finish and get the finish, you don't give a crap about the decision. And that's how Vadim Nemkov approached this one, and it worked out. He's the champion of the world.
So, Robin, Nemkov returns home. World champion, first ever 205-pound Russian champion in a major organization. I tell you that because you know what? I didn't know that. I feel like the Russian invasion's a very real thing. I feel like they've won plenty of matches. I didn't realize they had won 205. And I'm not the only one that appreciated that, Robin. When he returned home, it was to a hero's welcome.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's unfamiliar to him. Like, why is he so good? And you point out the Russian sort of invasion, as they call it. Why is this happening? These guys come up from the time that they're 3 and 5 and 7 years old. They're just thrown into a group, and you fight your way out of it. You become the champion of the 7-year-olds, then the champion of the 14-year-olds, and you just grind and fight and fight. You're not used to receiving heroes' welcomes. It's nice to see a guy who's a lifetime combat sportsman like that get home and have people celebrate him.
Yeah, I fully agree. And Robin, it largely is cultural, right? I mean, the North Americans, we like to build up a fight. The British boxers like to have a little fun back and forth with each other. But the Russian culture is very different. I mean, they really put their head down, and this is matter of fact, and this is competition. Whoever watches or the ratings or the anticipate, it's just not really about that for them. And in many ways, I feel as though there was a real story here that didn't get told. Look, when you're talking about Nemkov, and you want to talk about he's now beaten 4 world champions, or you want to talk about he's the first ever light heavyweight Russian champion, I appreciate these things. This was largely about revenge. This was largely about redemption. And no matter how much he didn't want to put that on his shoulders, Ryan Bader knocked out Nemkov's coach, mentor, and hero in Fedor. And as much as he didn't want to make this part of the story, Robin, it was part of the story.
Yeah, absolutely it was. And not only that, man, you're right. It's very culturally different. You know, when there's Mexican food and then there's South American food and there's Spanish food, there's a cultural influence on all of those things. Music, art, fighting's exactly the same way. And when you look over there, it isn't like, please go and avenge your mentor, or I hope you go and avenge your mentor. It's expected. It's an expectation. You will march your ass in there and you will knock that man out on behalf of Fedor. Yeah, you know, you carry that weight with you. And of course he did it.
Sure. And, you know, each match is different. It shows a real maturity. And I think that Nemkov's age needs to speak a lot to this storyline because this guy's going to be around for a minute. He did go in there with pressure. He did leave the motherland. And in Russia, much like the amateurs with the Olympics, they do not send you out of the country unless they believe you're going to bring home a medal. So, Robin, when you're looking at Nemkov, look, 4 world champions up, 4 world champions all finish face down. I mean, I have to ask you, as you look at the light heavyweight division, you look at the youth, you look at the record, you take in the landscape, is Nemkov the best light heavyweight in the world today?
Are you still retired?
I am.
Then yes.
Very sweet of you. You know, if I may answer my own question, since you were a little short with me there, partner, if I may answer my own question, though, it's a little bit of a tough debate. I mean, I feel as though we're having a bit of a strange conversation. You have a guy who's young. You have a guy who's a champion of the world. You have a guy who's been in there with 4 champions and defeated them all. By the way, he even slipped a middleweight in there. I mean, 2 different weight classes. It's very real. If you can't be a champ, but you go beat champs and champ.
Yeah.
It seems like a little bit of tough debate, and I think that it's very fun. There's some questions that you aren't going to answer. The question does come up because John Jones, who was a great light heavyweight, but he left the division. It seems as though it's open, but I am looking at a guy and going, does that 12 pounds of gold around his waist not answer that question?
Yeah, I think the defeating 4 champions is probably the big one, as well as his age and the performance itself. Sometimes when we're trying to decide, is this guy better than this guy, that doesn't work just with who beat who. Sometimes you have to look just at the skill sets, just at the attributes, just at the physicality, what they do on the night. And this guy has looked phenomenal. But your people over at ESPN, your family you work with over there, has been trying to compare these champions across both categories. And that's a tricky one for sure, because John Jones is no longer a light heavyweight. So this guy is easily poised to be at least among the discussion of the 1, 2, or 3 best light heavyweights on planet Earth. And I think he's probably the best.
Yeah, no, I think that it's very fair, and I think you could bring in a good debate. John Jones is always a great candidate. In all fairness, they do have a common opponent. I mean, if you have no other variables, and you have to turn to a common opponent. You could break that match down. John Jones did great with the common opponent. I'm talking about Ryan Bader, and Nemkov did great about it. But you do have a meaningful discussion. And Robin, in all fairness, as long as that discussion is on the table, then it's all fair game. And if there's one crowned world champion right now, I do think you have to look at that. And I don't offer that to you from any other perspective than a former sportsman. We agreed to operate under the unified rules. We agreed to a very specific skill set at a very specific weight at a very specific time. But we also agree to live with the result. And if we have one champion of light heavyweight who is crowned, I feel like there's not a lot to talk about here. Am I being unreasonable?
No, I think you're being very reasonable. I think this debate is actually fascinating that it's even happening right now. And I think actually you and I are probably the ones who can be the most unbiased. We both make meaningful, we have relationships and make actual human money paid. We're paid by both companies to be able to explore the artistry, look at the different details, analyze the stuff. So I think we can be pretty unbiased. Neither one of them is paying our bills. So I think we can have this conversation quite honestly.
Yeah, and you know what? Maybe I'm a little more of a homer than you are because of based on where we are, but I think that it is a conversation in fairness that is very debatable. I think that it's a fun one. And there's some things that you may not know, but we do have to defer back to the integrity of the sport and all the athletes involved that say we are going to agree, we are going to accept the results of this outcome. And right now we do have a crown champion, and I think it's a little bit rude to question that.
Yeah, people are being a little rude about it. There's no doubt about it. Yeah, it's a fascinating conversation. I mean, of course, we're not in the world yet where we can see him fight a Dominic Reyes. That's not the world we're living in, but maybe one day. But yes, when it comes right down to it, I think your point is strong, very strong. He's the light heavyweight champion of the world in mixed martial arts right now.
So, Robin, you and I weren't the only one watching Nemkov's performance, watching him win a world championship. So was new signee Corey Anderson, and here's what he had to say. All right, so Robin, I mean, listen, you heard it from the man himself, so let me ask you, where does Corey fit in? Oh, and by the way, how quickly should he get a shot at Nemkov?
Oh, that's one of those interesting conversations. It's like, is it fair if he gets the next shot? Like, under what sort of pretense are we living in a world that's fair, Chael? Do you know what? We have this conversation all the time. We have this conversation all the time. What exactly is fair about these things? I mean, we're supposed to line up to order a hamburger or to order a beer at the bar, and if we were second in line, we actually get it. It's a meritocracy. The meritocracy. And Corey Anderson comes in with a lot of credentials. He was ranked number 5 in the world, all over the world. Didn't matter what organization, what website, what .com you were looking at. Corey Anderson, and he'll get the next shot, and he should.
Yeah, and by the way, Robin, what kind of a world, to your point, is it where that's some kind of a reward? Okay, here, let me give you a scenario. You and I are going to arm wrestle each other, and whoever wins fights Nemkov. Now, we put our arms up, and you put my arm down. Aren't I the one kind of laughing at you a little bit? I mean, you beat me in an arm wrestling. Now you have to go fight Nemkov. I only bring that up because this is a volunteer army, right? Scott Coker is first going to look at who wants to do that. Nobody has to do it. Nobody's drafted. Whose hand is going up? And I got to tell you, in fairness right now, I'm seeing one hand, and it's a hand of Corey Anderson.
Yeah, he's sitting there saying, I came over, I wanted to get paid more, I wanted to fight for a world title, and he's going to get to do all of those things, no doubt about it.
All right, Robin, former champion Julia Budd returned. She took on Jessie Mealy. Now, the big question going into this was really around Budd, and it was quite simply, how do you rebound after a loss? I would say she passed the test.
Yes, indeed. You know, that's where you begin. Right? You have to come back and go from losing to winning. We can all see that. But I think if you're Julia Budd right now, you've been dominant, you've been the world champion. You have to make a turn now. She is one of the great female fighters on planet Earth, one of the great complete fighters on planet Earth. And that's something she wanted to show in that fight. And you saw it. She, mixed everything up. She played a fluid game. She was hard to catch. Mealy stayed in the fight. And that's a huge credit to her. But Julia Budd wanted to come out and say, look, the only losses I've ever had are to some of the best fighters in the world. I can beat those fighters. And that's what she wanted to show. And I think she showed that.
All right, Robin, tough question. Put your hat on. You're Scott Coker for a minute. Was it enough to get Julia Budd a rematch with Cyborg?
I think there's 3 elements, 4 elements. Let's go with 4. What's good for Julia Budd? What's good for Jesse Mealy? What's good for Bellator? And what's good for the audience? I think those are the 4, right? What does Cyborg do without Julia Budd right now? That's the best fight Cyborg can have. That's the best opponent she can have. It's the most meaningful fight. It's the most meaningful fight to the audience. That's true for Julia. That's true for Cyborg. That's true for Bellator. And that's true for the audience. So just make that fight.
Valentine Moldovsky comes in. He ends up matched up with Roy Nelson. I thought it was a very fun fight, but Robin, it was also very one-sided. As we talk about the Russian invasion, and as we talk about a new light heavyweight champion, it would certainly appear that we have a new heavyweight contender.
Yeah, and we've seen this heavyweight drop people with a jab and really put knuckles on guys and put them onto the ground. But we also saw him play smart. And I think that's why you might wonder if this guy could be fighting. I mean, does Bader have to fight another Russian this time to defend the heavyweight belt? You know, he was smart in this fight. If you asked me 2 years back, what's the key to beating Roy Nelson? You know what I wouldn't have come up with? Limit his mobility, right? You don't look at Roy Nelson and go, the key will be to limit that man's mobility. But that was the key. Trap him in certain positions, fatigue him, you know, stop him from moving. You don't want to have Roy Nelson moving his feet and throwing big hammers. It was a great fight. This is a dangerous fighter in Moldovsky, but it was also a very, very smart fight against a great veteran.
And is there a particular opponent, like if Bellator were to call you and say, who do you want to fight inside the heavyweight division? Is there a particular name you want to go after?
С кем я хотел бы подраться? Maybe. Of course, I want to fight Ryan Bader.
Scott, like if you're watching this, and you should be. I mean, this is a great show. Make this fight. Make Moldovsky and make Ryan Bader.
Scott, look, you're getting a little familiar. You're getting a little familiar with Coker. You know what, Robin? Mr. Coker. Okay, from now on. No, Scott.
What do you call him?
I call him Scott. I've been here for a period of time. I'm just saying, you're a little familiar, you know?
Yeah. That's a really good point, Mr. Sonnen. Thank you.
All right, Robin, fun rumor going around the social media world, but it was that Brock Lesnar, who's apparently become a free agent, versus Fedor. I heard a rumor of Brock Lesnar versus John Jones. This is nothing more than rumor, but this is supported now by odds makers who have put a line on it. So let me start. Brock Lesnar versus Fedor. You buying or selling?
Oh, I'm buying. I mean, you fought both these guys. Which guy would you rather fight right now?
Well,
same money, same everything else. Who would you rather fight?
Oh, no, I hear everything you're saying. I'm wondering about Brock's involved. I know Fedor will do it, and I know that Jones would do it. I'm asking about Brock. Is Brock leveraging us MMA fans once again, and we all get left to look like fools, or is there something to this?
He is currently leveraged. I mean, both things can be true. He is leveraging the fight fan, the MMA fan, the martial arts enthusiast to try to get more money from wrestling. But if you get offered enough money to fight Fedor that you actually take it, or the wrestling people are like, actually, just go do that thing and come back, then you do it, right? You know this to be true. The best negotiation is when both sides are real. So hopefully, presumably, that's how he's playing it. But, I mean, I like Brock Lesnar versus Fedor, and if I'm Brock Lesnar, I would prefer the fight to the smaller, dangerous legend that is much older than I would to the much taller, long, rangier, younger legend who may be a little more vital right now. I mean, that's the fight that all other things are equal. If I'm Brock Lesnar, give me that Fedor legend.
Yeah, and Robin, I know what you just said is accurate, but there's a piece of me that wants to deny him. I mean, you talk about Brock Lesnar, he's coming in, he's going to leverage this deal and this deal. Fair play. I get the whole thing. But the competitor, do we want to see? There's something about that bothers me. I mean, if you've got to be bribed, if you want to hang your hat on the hole, if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. Man, this is competition. Fedor doesn't need any of this, and Fedor doesn't need any more championships. There's a love of the sport and a genuine passion. There's a reason that he entered the Grand Prix after being the greatest heavyweight of all time. I only offer you that because there's something as a viewer for me that matters. Do you want to come back because you want to beat Fedor? Do you want to come back because this was a match that got away, that people have questioned? You still have an opportunity to do it. If you just want to do it for our money, am I being
no?
That bothers me.
Listen, man, you're making sense. You're making absolute sense. But there's all of us involved, the audience and the game and whatever, but there's also Fedor and Brock. Brock is the entertainer who seems to enjoy adventures. Sometimes he fights, sometimes he performs, but Fedor is the lifelong combat sportsman. And if I'm Fedor, I certainly want this fight. That big monster of a man, big and also in Fedor's history, it has been defeating monsters of men who had particular skill sets and doing it against all odds. If I'm Fedor, I certainly want this fight. If I'm Brock Lesnar, he's not as pure a sportsman, pure a competitor. So maybe those puzzle pieces fit.
All right, let's look ahead to Bellator 245 going down September 11th, starting with Phil Davis versus Machida on top of the bill. We're going to move into the debut of Zangano taking on Holloway, and ultimately for me, we got Ed Ruth taking on my teammate, Taylor Johnson. Robin, where should we begin?
We got to start at the top, man. Phil and Lyoto, that's a dynamite matchup. There's a million things we could talk about, all kinds of concepts and narratives and analysis. But I think the first one, we talk sometimes, it's a rematch. And it is. When you look at the thing, it'll say Bellator 245, Davis versus Machida 2. But these two guys are completely different men, martial artists, athletes, humans, all of it since they fought last time.
All right, so can I personalize this for you real fast? But
yes.
I fought Machida, and I got to tell you, Robin, I couldn't find him. And it wasn't a matter of losing once we engaged or having a battle, and I couldn't find him. And I've been in there 50 times in a couple of amateur fights. I can't say that for anybody else, regardless of the outcome and how the match went. That specific thing of calling a guy a ghost or just saying you couldn't close the distance, I can't compare anything to it. I've trained with Phil Davis. And regardless of what happened, once we did find each other, I could find him. If I wanted to start a fight, if I wanted to get in a mix-up, I could. I only offer that because these guys are rematching, and many people forgot that. And I think that Phil Davis, who won that first fight, would also tell you what I'm telling you, which is, I might have won the moments, but I had a hard time getting. There's a lot of strategy. There's a lot of cutting off the ring. There's a lot of watching the guy. But she does what we call very good eyes. He can see things and surprise you all of a sudden, right? Even though Phil's been in there, and I think that will help Phil. I think Machida's one of those guys, if you can feel him once, maybe it'll help you the second time. But he's still going to have to find him.
Yeah. No, you make an interesting point. At least the belief, like he doesn't have the doubt that he can touch Machida or cut him off or try to shoehorn him into a position, because historically he's done that. Years ago, he was able to do that. That is a really good point. But you're right, man. Like Machida's stepping into shadows. He's stepping into places that your eyes don't see, in rhythms that you can't read. I don't have to tell you this. You experienced it, like you said. And that's what makes him so unique. And the weird part about it is it's not based on speed. It's not based on attributes or athleticism. So getting older actually kind of makes him better at it. It's based on nuance and feel and knowledge, right? So, I mean, this is one of those fights you can really, really get stoked for.
All right, and at first glance, when you take a look at Zangano going to take on Holloway, what's your impressions?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, too. I mean, Zangano is 38 years old. She hasn't fought in 2 years. She's a top-level performer. If she has a hold of you, she can use that to reel you in, to get a body lock or get something and start to attack your neck. But I think that's the big one for me. I mean, Holloway came up and she fought short notice against the Bellator stud, where she was definitely the underdog, a Bellator prospect coming up, and she defeated her. So she's been in this situation before. It's Zangano that's going to have the extra pressure. Zangano that's going to have sort of that spotlight effect of the cameras and the humans watching at home and all of that she's going to have to deal with. And I think that's the variable.
And I appreciate you bringing that up, because the intangibles are a very real thing. And when you take a period of time, unless your name's Dominic Cruz, it seems to affect you. When you go into a brand new promotion, it seems to affect you. That first time out's tough. Zangano lands herself in a co-main event spot after a couple of years off with a very hard opponent in Holloway. I don't counter out, Rob. That isn't my message. I just share with you that this isn't always about strength right here, and I feel that Zangano's going to have to show some strength right here. All right, Robin, as we look at Ed Ruth, and I will disclose against my teammate Taylor Johnson, but I would like to add for and remind you, this is at 185 pounds, which is very relevant when you have Ed Ruth, who many people thought was going to go on to be the world champion. When he was in the Grand Prix, people believed he was the favorite in many ways, but he's changing weight classes. What do you think?
Yeah, very interesting. You know, he's a big, powerful guy. You know this. And we can talk to anyone. You mentioned Dominic Cruz earlier today, from a Dominic Cruz up to a Chael Sonnen. Guys who wrestled their whole life like Ed Ruth, they can handle changes in weight, right? They can perform with the changes in weight. So I think that's that aspect Ed Ruth will be prepared for. I really like this fight. I mean, Ed Ruth is coming off a loss to Amasov. And that's not, you know, his dreams of being undefeated long gone now. His dreams of being Bellator champion still existing, coming off of a loss right now, fighting a young guy, trains with Chael Sonnen. Maybe he just found that out. That might add extra pressure.
All right, and you know what? Maybe I could shed some light on Taylor Johnson for you in case you haven't seen him or you're not as familiar. Ed Ruth's always fighting on TV. One thing about Taylor, he was a college wrestler, Division I out here in Oregon State. Got very captivated, as many do, with the MMA and started learning the hands and the kicks and the submissions. He understands who Ed Ruth is. There is a respect factor. When two wrestlers meet up, and Ed Ruth being one of the more decorated one, and you do have to remind yourself, and you have to remind Taylor, we're not wrestling. This isn't the NCAA. There are different rules under a different time set, and anything goes under the unified rules, broad stroke statement. But it is a real thing. And even being in a practice room and seeing a guy, I will just share with you, he has the skills to win this fight. Does he know that, Robin? I don't want to say too much. Does he know that? And I think that is going to be a big question as he goes into this. All right, also on the card, we have to look forward to former world champion Rafael Caballo returning. We've got human highlight reel. Raymond Daniels back in there. And, of course, nearly undefeated heavyweight prospect Tyrell Fortune taking on bare knuckle boxing's Jack May. Do not miss it. Robin, this was fun. We should do it again. By the way, how about we do it again tomorrow?
I'm in. Count me in. It's a pleasure, man. You know I love you.
Don't miss Bellator 245 September 11th on Paramount Network.